Oh, no. Pardon? No, I registered, but you can join on the same link, I'm sure. No, not yet, but I'm gonna text her today because she's at this thing.
Oh, okay.
So I know she'll have a phone on her. How do I know if it's got volume on? Cameras on.
Yeah.
Can they hear me?
Yeah.
So what do I do? Just click that.
Yeah.
I don't know if my speaker's I can see it.
It started.
No, I don't. I think the person's just put this up. Oh, just take it. Maybe she was just pretending.
Do you want?
No. Oh.
Stupid thing.
So can we get that onto here or not really, because we don't have a screen? So I have to watch it.
Hello to everyone online. Can you just thumbs up if you can hear me? Can everyone hear me online?
Yes, from Natalie.
Thank
Bunbury.
you. We'll start in approximately 10 minutes. Just a reminder, if everyone can just mute and turn your cameras off. Thank you. Is it unmuted?
Someone's on, someone's got theirs.
I need to mute on there.
It's new. Yeah. I used to be in there. Just tell me.
Yeah. Good morning, everyone. We'll make a start. If everyone online can please turn off their cameras and mute their microphones, please. Can everyone online hear me?
Yes.
Yes, thank you. Can you please mute
Yes.
yourselves and turn off your cameras, please?
Nala Kadich, Nonga Mort, Kenyan Kadich, Nija Buja. I acknowledge the Wajak people, my people of the Noongar Nation, as the traditional custodians of the land of we meet today. As a Wajak person, I ask you to join me in celebrating our culture today and every day and note how privileged we are to share this country. I pay my respects to my elders, past, present and emerging, and I also pay my respects to those from other lands present today and online. Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly, and good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the 2024 Influenza update. My name is Shauna Jacob, and I'm the Education Officer within the immunisation team. Before we commence, just a few housekeeping rules. We request, again, I'll just say for those that have just come online, that we require the cameras off and the microphones muted. We've allocated question time at the end of each presenter's presentation. If there are any questions online, please type them into the chat and we will ask them on your behalf. Any unanswered questions can be collated and will sent to the appropriate presenter post-event. Emma will be monitoring the Teams meeting throughout the event. If you are having any troubles, please feel free to send her an email. This information session is being recorded and will be made available on the immunisation education webpage as well as circulated among the attendees after the event. For those attending in person today, the restrooms are across the hall from the theatrette doors. In the event of a fire, we will go out through the main building and congregate near the car park across the building. And if you can, please put your phones on silent, that would be great. I would now like to welcome Dr. David Speers, if he's not. Yeah. David Speers is a consultant pathologist at Pathwest Lab Medicine. David will provide an overview of influenza. Thank you.
You use the mouse.
Yes, you can use them. Oh, what's happening?
You can't see it, but the screen's going wild here. I might read off that screen. Thank you for the invitation to talk. I've been asked to talk on a few topics that you can see there, with the intent of providing some of the fundamentals and background to then follow with a lot of other excellent talks specifically about vaccines. So that doesn't work, so does that? Do I enter? Okay. So, as I say, I was asked to talk about a case and then I'll talk about influenza itself. So, this is a case of a 39-year-old woman admitted to the hospital that I work at, and she presented with a typical ILI, but then in the emergency department became quite short of breath reasonably quickly. She was commenced on what is a pretty standard cocktail of antibiotics together with oseltamivir for someone with community-acquired pneumonia. But she continued to deteriorate and basically went into respiratory failure. She became hypotensive and tachycardic, and this prompted intubation and transfer to the intensive care unit. The past medical history is relevant for some intravenous drug use, secondary hep C, some alcoholism, and importantly, some obesity. Sorry, I don't have a BMI. Blood cultures were negative. Sputum showed some white cells, but no bacterial pathogens of note. And a PCR of the nose and throat swab was positive for the H1N1 2009 virus. Here's an X-ray on her first day being admitted to ICU, and I think you should be able to appreciate the mainly peripheral, but also scattered infiltrates through both lungs, quite a diffuse pattern. So she received broad spectrum antibiotics and the antiviral was continued, but she then developed an ARDS pattern, which is something we saw quite commonly after the 2009 pandemic. She remained febrile, her kidneys began to fail, her antibiotics were escalated and she was put on dialysis for a kidney failure. She then had a number of common intensive care unit sort of complications, aspiration pneumonia from being intubated, a UTI from her IDC. And like a lot of people who spend a reasonable amount of time in the ICU, she then became encephalopathic and had critical illness myopathy, which is a problem when you're trying to extubate people because their respiratory muscles are too weak. She also interestingly developed autonomic dysregulation, so there's a lot of trouble controlling heart rates and blood pressures. And she then developed a myocarditis, and we actually had a flu PCR positive on blood for this lady as well. And here's her X-ray a week later, and you can see now quite a diffuse ARDS sort of pattern that's developed. It makes it very hard to ventilate people like this, and they often end up on a system called ECMO, where you basically have to take the blood, oxygenate it, and put it back in. And here's a CT scan of the chest in cross-section, and you can see what we call ground glass effect and also scattered infiltrates as well. So she spent 26 days in our intensive care unit. She spent almost 4 months in hospital and was unable to return home due to multiple medical problems and was sent to transitional care with a plan to see if she could reach independence again, but she subsequently died 2 months later. Now, most people in this setting will die from microaspiration pneumonias and so forth in the care facilities. So the cause of death could well go down as bacterial pneumonia, but if she hadn't had the flu, she wouldn't have died. So this is the difference between direct and attributable cause of mortality from influenza. So a sobering case of how severe flu can actually be in people who are otherwise well in younger age. So just to talk a bit about flu itself now. So we talk about flu A and flu B. There's also a flu C, which I won't talk about at the moment. The flus have a genome made up of 8 individual pieces of RNA. Now, this is of importance when you talk about influenza A, because it makes it very easy to swap out one of these 8 segments. So there's a hemagglutinin gene on one of these, there's a neuraminidase gene on another one of these 8 segments. Now, the natural source of influenza A is actually water birds in the environment. and it's an intestinal infection of these birds. And so they fly around the world, depositing their guano in all the natural water sources around the world, and they deposit a huge amount of influenza A in all the water sources. So this allows this natural ecosystem of influenza A. Now, there's lots of different types of hemagglutinin. I've listed 15 here, but I think they're up to 20 now, and there's lots of different neuraminases. So there's lots of ability to mix and match. And in certain animals, like pigs and birds, two influenzas can mix and match and swap their genetic material. And that allows a new hemagglutinin and a new neuraminidase to appear in influenza A. You don't get that in influenza B because influenza B is a human infection with only one hemagglutinin subtype. So you can get antigenic drift each year with both flu A and flu B, but you can only get antigenic shift with a whole new hemagglutinin with influenza A because of this animal reservoir. So influenza A pandemics are inevitable. The classic requirements for a new pandemic are a new hemagglutinin coming along, as I just talked about. The virus has to be able to replicate in humans. You have to have a susceptible world population, and it has to be able to spread from person to person. If you look at the H5 avian influenza, it fulfills all of these criteria except the last one, ability to spread person to person efficiently. So this is one of the reasons why we haven't had an avian influenza pandemic to this point. So people have been tracking pandemics going back centuries, and on average, you have a pandemic about every 14 years. So we had 3 pandemics last century, and the 1918 pandemic was the one with the highest mortality recorded. And then there was the one this year, which was considered a mild pandemic, and it quickly evolved into a seasonal influenza virus as well. So if you look at the timeline on the bottom there, you can see that perhaps if influenza read textbooks, we were due for an H2 pandemic next. But we didn't have that. We had the so-called swine flu, which was an H1, but it was a reassortment H1 virus, where there was enough novelty in the hemagglutinin acquired from swine influenza to cause a pandemic, but not a particularly severe one. So here's some PathWest data for WA. And there's just a few points to bring out from this. You can see that each year you get a flu epidemic, barring COVID. And then the size of the epidemic varies from year to year. But each year you get a mix of the 3 big influenza viruses, H1, H3, and flu B. And it's just a proportion between the two that varies. You can see that before the 2009 pandemic, we had the old type of H1 influenza, which became extinct with the 2009 pandemic because the new H1 came along and replaced it. You can see that it accounted for most of the influenza that season, that's in the blue, and then it quickly settled back into a seasonal pattern, varying between the 3 types of flu virus that we see. Until 2020, when the COVID pandemic came along, and you can see we had a flat line then through the rest of 2020 and 2021 until all the travel restrictions and other restrictions were lifted, and then we returned to our mix of flu, which is where we're at the moment. So the burden of disease, as I alluded to in the case report, depends on how you count the figures. So there are millions of cases of severe flu around the world every year, and there's hundreds of thousands of direct attributable deaths as well. But then there's this concept of excess mortality, and you can see on the picture there, this is old data, but it illustrates it well. You can see that the size of the influenza season, which is the blue bars on the bottom, reflects the excess mortality in the population in general. And these are people who have died of strokes and heart attacks and bacterial pneumonias, not attributed to flu, but there is still this excess mortality that follows the flu season there. So how do you prevent this excess mortality? It's influenza vaccination, of course. So the risk groups you most want to protect with vaccination are the most susceptible people to hospitalisation and death. So that's the older adults, those with comorbidities, pregnant women, healthcare workers because they get exposed to more flu than the average person in the population, and young children. The greatest impact of vaccination on trying to stop transmission is a completely different group, of course. That's the school-aged children, who are the ones who actually spread the flu around. So your use of vaccine is dependent on what your aim is. So what are the vaccine types? So there are candidate live vaccine strains that are selected and grown up. They're grown up in either eggs or in cell culture, and they're used to make what's called subunit vaccines, which is where you harvest the hemagglutinin and or the neuraminidase from them. You try not to use whole cell influenza vaccines because they're more reactogenic. So you try and just take particularly the hemagglutinin part of it. And these are the vaccines that have been used for many years in the sort of risk groups that I just talked about. It's well known that the older people have less robust responses to the vaccine. So there's a few ways that this has been countered. First of all, and commonly used, is you increase the amount of hemagglutinin in your vaccine. So usually there's about 15 micrograms in a vaccine. You boost it up to 45 or 60. You can give multiple doses, and that was one of the recommendations in the past, or you can use adjuvants like alum or squalene to boost the immune response. The live attenuated vaccine is more recent. It's the same sort of selected candidate vaccines that are grown up, produced in eggs. And the difference there is you attenuate the virus and you make it cold adapted, so it can't grow at body temperature. So when you have your nasal spray, you can't get the systemic flu reaction. Now, Russians have been using this way back since the 80s, and Western countries have adopted it more recently. Particularly good for children to avoid needles, of course. And the data shows that those children 2 years or older have quite a good immune response to the vaccine, but less so in older people and less so in very young children. And then there's the issue of a live vaccine in the immunocompromised. Recombinant vaccines have been investigated as well. In this case, what you do is you take the hemagglutinin gene and you splice it into a different virus, which you then grow up in cell culture. I've used the example of a baculovirus that grows in insects, so it can't grow in humans, and that produces the hemagglutinin for you, which you then harvest and use in your vaccine. It avoids problems of egg adaptation, which I'll come back to. And the holy grail, I guess, of influenza vaccination are the universal vaccines. And these are vaccines where you don't have to account for what the circulating strains are. So you can do this in one or two ways. You can target parts of the virus that don't change year to year, or you can have what's called a mosaic vaccine, where instead of just having a single H1 and a single H3 hemagglutinin, as I said, there's up to 20 hemagglutinins out there, you put them all in the vaccine. And therefore, it doesn't matter which hemagglutinin might be circulating that year. Sounds good in theory, doesn't always work in practice because you've got a lot of different hemagglutinins and the one you want may be at insufficient level because you've got 19 other hemagglutinins in there that aren't doing very much. And on the success of the messenger RNA vaccines, they're also turning that technology to influenza vaccines as well. There are also viral vectors and nanoparticles being investigated as well. So as I said, the vaccine strains for the common vaccines can be either egg-based or cell culture produced. It's a slow process. You need billions of eggs around the world. They're fertile eggs. And one problem with using eggs is a problem called egg adaptation. So the virus gets inoculated into the egg, but it then genetically modifies itself to grow really well in eggs, but it can lose its antigenicity in the process of doing that. And then there is the issue of egg allergy. Now, this might be talked on later, but I've just included the ATAGI statement there, that people with egg allergy, including anaphylaxis, can safely receive the influenza vaccine unless they've had a previous serious reaction. So the egg-based ones are used in the inactivated vaccines, but also in the live attenuated, as I said. So what about cell culture? It allows faster production than growing up influenza viruses in eggs. It avoids this egg adaptation problem. But cell culture at that sort of factory scale is very prone to contamination. And currently there's very limited production capacity. You can imagine the facilities around the world are all geared to fertile eggs. To change the machinery over to do cell culture at that sort of scale is a huge undertaking and a huge investment. So the vaccine composition, as you know, can be either trivalent or quadrivalent, depending on whether you have one or both influenza B lineages present. So each year, there's a vaccine composition meeting of the WHO collaborating laboratories, which for the Northern Hemisphere, they meet in February, and for the Southern Hemisphere, meet in September. And that gives that 6 to 8 months to allow all the production through eggs and the distribution of the vaccine for the next flu season. So at this committee, there's a review of the characteristics of the circulating viruses, and then there's a review of the vaccine effectiveness and strains that might be resistant. So in general, this has been done through what's called a hemagglutination inhibition titer. And if you have a titer of 40 or more, it's meant to correspond to about 50% protection. Now, they've traditionally used ferrets who have never been infected with influenza before, but now they're moved over to humans, and there's several advantages to that. First of all, you can get a better appreciation of the vaccine protection across different age groups, and it also accounts for those who have had previous influenza vaccination, which actually affects how you respond to your new vaccine, which I'll come back to shortly. So they use this sort of data to make recommendations over what the vaccine candidate viruses will be, and then they go off into their production phase. Now, the job of the meeting, the WHO committee, is to be as accurate as possible as what's going to circulate in the next winter in temperate zones, or potentially all year in the tropical zones. So you're familiar with flu A and flu B, which are called types. And then there are the subtypes of flu A. And as I said, there's only one subtype of flu B, but there's 2 lineages that have been circulating of flu B. Now, within each subtype, there are clades, and within each clade, there are subclades. So what you're trying to do is actually pick the subclade of the virus that's going to be dominant in your next season. And that's why when you look at the viruses in the vaccine, you see city names and country names and that, because nomenclature uses the place where that strain was first isolated from. So that's why you see Brisbane or Singapore come up to denote the subclades. And you can see that Yamagata is much more conserved. It doesn't have any subclades. An interesting thing happened when COVID came along, in that what it did is it caused a dramatic reduction in the diversity of all different respiratory viruses. And that included flu, but also RSV and human metapneumovirus and so forth. So I tried very hard not to put a genomic phylogenetic map in this talk, because everyone glazes over when I drift into genomics. So I've done it schematically here. So you can see at the start of the pandemic, there were lots of different subclades circulating for H1, H3, the lineage Victoria for B, but only the one for Yamagata, as I said. And as the pandemic went on with all the physical restrictions, you can see that all the different viruses started to come down to just a single subclade that seemed to dominate for each one. And Yamagata itself seemed to stop circulating entirely. So this is what happens when you put all the brakes on the spread of a virus. You lose that diversity, and it comes down to just one or two individual clades. So as I said, the Yamagata lineage of flu B seems to have disappeared. So is it actually extinct? It's probably too early to say. It's known that in influenza B that a lineage can go into dormancy for a number of years and then reappear. Victoria went into dormancy in the 1990s and then reappeared in the 2000s. We know that Yamagata circulates less well than the Victoria lineage does, and we know that because the transmission chains are shorter and the growth phase of an outbreak is slower as well. And we know that Yamagata strains, some of their subclades can just become extinct, apparently spontaneously. Now, Yamagata preferentially affects the adults, and the Victoria lineage preferentially affects the children. So when COVID came along, it was thought that Yamagata, which is a better spreader around the world, is facilitated by the adults who have flu B during their travel. And of course, when the COVID pandemic came along, all that travel stopped. So the mechanism for how Yamagata allows itself to persist in the world population was sort of taken away from it. Also, if you look at the map here, so here's a map of our two lineages for flu B. This is Pathwest data from WA as well. You can see that when the 2009 pandemic hit, Yamagata seemed to have taken a real hit there, and it slowly came back, peaked in 2015, and then was ebbing away by 2019 when COVID came along. So at the time COVID came, there was really no Yamagata circulating at all. There was only the Victoria lineage. And then with all the restrictions, there was neither flu B virus circulating. When the restrictions were listed, Victoria came back, but Yamagata didn't. So it could be for all those sorts of reasons that we may have made Yamagata go extinct. Now, I was asked to talk about vaccine effectiveness, so I'm just going to talk more generally about this. First of all, there's no established correlate for protection. I talked about using hemagglutination inhibition titers, but the actual protection for influenza comes from both a cell-mediated immune response as well as an antibody response. And if you've read the VE estimates in the literature, you'll see that there's great diversity in spread. And that's because there's a lot of confounders in these studies. Different people respond differently to the vaccine. The older respond less well, particularly to H3, as I said before. The study designs they use are quite different. They compare different vaccines. They might choose a year when there's a mismatch of the vaccine, and they might have a year where they're struck with egg adaptation as well. In general, healthy adults over many years, about 60% protection is what one large pooled efficacy study showed, which effectively means that your chance of getting flu goes down from 2.3% for that flu season down to under 1%. The trivalent vaccines have shown good coverage for flu A, but as you would expect, because there's only one of the flu Bs in there, you can get less effective cover if there's a flu B. If you happen to pick Yamagata and it's a Victoria season, it's not going to do so well. The live attenuated and recombinant vaccines also in the same sort of ballpark. In the older, as I said, they have this issue of immunosenescence, particularly against H3, which is the main flu that strikes the elderly. And they do much better for the H1 and B. And then there are the manoeuvres, as I said, adding adjuvant and so forth boosts that response. In children, quite a good response, like in the younger adults, and the live attenuated vaccine, as I said before, gives equivalent protection, but less response in the young children under the age of 2. In pregnancy, shown to be effective by halving your relative risk if you're vaccinated. And in the immune compromised, you might think that their vaccine responses would be poor, but they actually do surprisingly well if they're vaccinated with their protection. But as I said, the efficacy also varies year to year. Usually if you get a vaccine dropout, it's because either you've picked the wrong flu B lineage in your trivalent vaccine, or there's a mismatch in the H3. The H1 has actually been very stable since the pandemic came along, and there's quite good matching for that year after year. H3 can catch you out for a few reasons. There's more antigenic drift with H3, so it changes from year to year. So what caused a problem in the Northern Hemisphere when you're picking the Southern Hemisphere vaccine may not be what actually hits our shores 6 months later. Also, you can get rapid mutation within the same year. As I said, you've got to pick the vaccine 6 months ahead of time. That gives enough time for mutation of H3 to actually be different when it actually starts compared to what was circulating when you actually chose the vaccine in the first place. And there's examples of that. In the 2014 and 15 Northern Hemisphere season, there was a big H3 year, 80% of all cases, and there was only 13% coverage because of this mutation. Then there's the issue of egg adaptation that I talked about, where you can lose antigenicity. That happened in our 2017 flu season. We had just over half of cases due to H3. Overall protection was 42%, but H3 was only 33%. And then there's individual responses which can vary as well. So your best immune response is when you get the vaccine for that particular year. If you've been previously vaccinated and you get the vaccine for this year, you get a bit of a blunted response. But if you don't get the vaccine for that year, you get the worst response at all. So the advice is always to have the vaccine every year, because you're always better off than someone who doesn't have the vaccine that year. And you just have to accept the previous vaccination can affect your immune response. And people argue over the magnitude of that. Lastly, I was asked to talk about the timing of vaccination. So once again, there's measuring the antibody response. And we know that the antibody response peaks at 2 to 4 weeks after your vaccine, and then it slowly ebbs away over the next 6 months. But what you really want to know is what is the VE, the vaccine effectiveness for that. So there was a reasonable meta-analysis done to investigate this, and they looked at 14 test negative design studies. Now, you might be aware what a test negative design study is, but basically people come in, they have an ILI, and they get tested, and they're either influenza PCR positive or influenza PCR negative, and you're comparing between the numbers of both in those who've been vaccinated and those who haven't been vaccinated. So that's the crux of this study. What it does is it takes out testing bias of who was tested for flu in the first place, because you only include people who've actually been tested for flu. And what they show is that the vaccine effectiveness is best in the first 90 days or 3 months after your vaccine, and then it wanes. And it wanes for all 3 subtypes, all 2 subtypes and influenza B, but it seems to wane faster for the H3 compared to the other 2. So what I've got here in this graph is these are our pathwest percentage positivities for the last 6 years of influenza. And you can see that 2019 in the blue was a big flu year for us. Then COVID came along. So the purple line, I'm not sure if this shows, the purple line is the 2020 season, which got abolished when all the restrictions came in for COVID. And then 2021 was a complete flatline. And then in 2022, we had this season here. 2023, we had this season here, and we've just started the 2024 season. So if you look at that, our peak of flu over the recent past has fallen in early June. So half are before and half are after that time date. If you take your 90 days and transpose that on that, you get this sort of pattern to capture most people who would have been contracting flu. And that brings the date of when you want to start your vaccine by the end of April. It's different in the tropics because they don't have a nice winter epidemic season of influenza like you have in temperate zones. They have multiple peaks and year-round activity. So what the WHO has done is come up with these maps for timing and which vaccine you should actually use. So on the top map is vaccination timing. So with the vertical bars, that is when you start vaccinating in October, which is when the Northern Hemisphere people tend to do it. And in the horizontal bars is you start vaccinating in April, which is when we would start vaccinating. Interestingly, India and some of Southeast Asia is different to the rest of the world when they do this. And when you look at which vaccine should you use, the Northern Hemisphere vaccine or the Southern Hemisphere vaccine, you can see that in general, again, if you're below the equator, you follow the Southern Hemisphere vaccine, and if you're above the equator, you use the Northern Hemisphere vaccine, once again, with the exception of the subcontinent as well. But they do say you should use your local data as much as possible. They think the logistics of doing multiple vaccines through the year, which would probably be better, is just not achievable in a lot of these tropical countries. So to summarise then, the vaccine is not 100% effective, but is of great benefit, particularly for the people like the older people who you want to protect. But you protect everyone who gets the vaccine, but particularly, once again, the older population. You can prevent hospitalisation and pneumonia. You can prevent death with the vaccine to a fair proportion for what is a simple vaccine for these people every year. To avoid one cardiovascular event, you have to give 58 vaccines. But if someone's just had a heart attack, you only have to give 8 vaccines to prevent them having a second heart attack from catching flu as well. So the benefits are there for the people who need it the most. So I'll stop there, and I'm not sure how I've done for time, but thank you. Okay.
Is there anyone in the room that has questions for David?
I just had a question about the effectiveness of the nasal spray live attenuated vaccine. So I think you mentioned it was less effective in adolescents and adults. Is this because of a mechanism of action, or just because presumably you'll be inhaling it and you don't get it into your lungs as well as maybe a young child? Is that?
I think it's more related to not so much the delivery. You would expect the adults would be at least as successful, if not more successful, in the intranasal dosing. So I think it's an inherent immune-based phenomenon myself.
From the NIP-funded vaccines, the cellular-based is only the Flucelvax. So from the NIP-funded vaccines.
From the funded vaccines, yeah.
Yes, it's just Flucelvax and the others are egg-based?
The cell culture-based vaccines are not very common. There are some being produced, but my understanding is the majority is still egg-based. Someone may correct me, but that's been the traditional way for decades of doing it, and still is, as far as I'm aware.
And how do we vaccinate people traveling to Europe? So if somebody plans travel to Europe in October. Do we advise them to actually get the vaccine in Europe, or what can we do?
Yeah, there's actually advice on the WHO website about travel because unfortunately, when a lot of people want to travel, the local vaccine has a short expiry date that you'd be aware of. So often you can't get virus that hasn't expired, vaccine that hasn't expired. And then it's access to actually get the vaccine when you get there. What we've done a number of times is sometimes the vaccines between North and South are the same and sometimes they're slightly different. But some vaccine is better than no vaccine. So if you don't want to chance trying to get a vaccine when you arrive, because remember you have to wait 10 days before it becomes active. And your greatest risk is during travel, as well as when you're in a particular country. So a lot of it depends on when you're traveling, what time, and if there's available vaccine locally is probably the safest way to go, because that will still give you protection. But then there's the question of when did you have your other? If you'd already had the seasonal vaccine here, your vaccine level might still be good and you don't need anything, or it may have waned as well. So it all depends on timing as well. So it's hard to be hard and fast about how you recommend it, but there are guidelines out there.
Thank you.
Thank you, David. I just have a question. The WHO have recommended recently, I read that to switch back to a TIV, probably because of the Yamagata seemingly having disappeared. What would be the benefit of going from a QIV to a TIV?
There's a benefit in cost and there's a benefit in production time. It is cheaper and quicker to develop a trivalent than a quadrivalent for obvious reasons. So the WHO collaborating labs are going to have to decide. Now, I couldn't make the vaccine meeting last September because I was at a different meeting, but the options are to continue the Yamagata just in case it comes back, or to recommend a trivalent vaccine. Alternately, you have a slot available in the quad vaccine. So the other option is to put two H3s, which is the biggest problem with mismatch. Remember, I said in the vaccines, if you don't have to worry about picking the wrong flu B, you could have a quadrivalent vaccine with two H3s in it, a single B and a single H1. And that may help alleviate the problem of the H3 mismatch, which is one of the big problems of vaccine. So they're the different options, and I guess it'll come down to other factors, because for coverage and protection, the latter option is the best way to go. But if it's cheaper and faster, then maybe that's a good option for some countries as well.
Thank you.
David, just in response to the question before, there will be one cell-based vaccine on the NIP this year, flu cell vax, from 5 to 65. There'll be two standard non-cell-based vaccines, and there'll be no preference between that. I don't know how much flu cell vax we'll get in Western Australia, but there will be a cell-based vaccine available.
Yeah, they're slowly coming in, but there's all the production issues as to how quickly that can happen.
Question from the chat.
Hi, so this is from Jenny. Would you recommend a booster influenza vaccine for over 65 years, 3 months after the first vaccine? And if not, when?
So as I said, there are a number of ways to alleviate the lower response in the older people. There is the increased amount of antigen, there's the use of an adjuvant, and there's multiple dosing. If you're over 65, there's already the increased dose of antigen available, and that would be what is recommended, that you have the increased dose or the adjuvant recommended for those over 65, rather than multiple dosing, is my understanding.
Thank you so much, David. Our next presenter is Dr. Nevada Pingault, epidemiologist for the Surveillance and Disease Control Program at the Communicable Disease Control Directorate, or CDCD. Nevada will be presenting on the influenza disease surveillance from 2023. That presented? No, not presenting. Presenting. May have to do it.
I think when you go to the slide presentation, then it stops presenting.
Sorry, Nevada.
That's all right. You'll just have to. No problem. Hi, everyone. Sorry for technical difficulties. I'm going to be presenting some background information about influenza epidemiology in historical years, focusing on 2023, and then giving you an overview of what we've had in the 2024 season so far. Okay, so what we've got here is our influenza notifications by Australian jurisdiction between 2018 and 2023. And on this graph on the y-axis, we've got the rate per 100,000 population and then our year of notification. Our WA notifications are in red in this graph. And I think what's jumps out at people here is that in 2020 and 2021, we really didn't have a season, which was reiterated what David just went through. And what we've seen in 2023 is that influenza in most jurisdictions has either returned to or exceeded our pre-pandemic years. The rates vary across the country, with the lowest rate in Tasmania and the highest rate in Queensland. Moving on to looking at Western Australia by our public health units. Again, we've got the rate on our y-axis and the year of notification on the x-axis. I'll just point out that I have omitted 2020 and 2021 because basically there were no cases. And what we can see here is that In 2023, we had the second highest number of notifications in the state. 2019 was our biggest year. And the rates in 2023 exceeded our rates in 2022, with the exception of Midwest, which came down from a peak in 2019. The highest rates that we had in 2023 were in our Kimberley and Pilbara public health units. And then looking at our hospitalisations per year, so we've got our hospitalised in blue and our not hospitalised cases in orange, and it varies from year to year, and between those years we had between 13 and 23% of our cases hospitalised, and between 0.08 and 0.8% of cases died. This graph is looking at age groups and cases by Aboriginality in 2023. So again, we've got our rate on our y-axis and our age groups on our x-axis here. And what we can see is that basically we have higher rates of infection in our Aboriginal population for all age groups, except in the 85 plus years here, where non-Aboriginal people have a higher case rate. And then we can see that children under 10 years are more affected in both the Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal population, which again reiterates what David said about them being really great spreaders. This is going to be very basic because David's already given a great overview of influenza types. But again, you can see that the proportion of A and B types varies with each year. Generally, well, always, year A strain or A type predominates, but the proportion of B strain does vary from year to year. And in 2023, we had approximately a 70 to 30% split between A and B. And I'll just finish up the overview of historical data by looking at influenza in the Americas and in Europe. This is data from the WHO from FluNet. So we've got the Americas graph in the top and the European graph at the bottom. And one thing I'll just point out to start off with is you can see here that both the Americas and Europe did have a 2020 flu season, whereas we did not. But in 2021, they didn't see much flu, much like us. From what we can see here is that in 2023, this is quite interesting in that there's almost a bit of a bimodal peak in both the Americas and Europe, with that later peak being a lot more of B type available or circulating, sorry. And one thing we are quite interested in is what has happened so far in the 2024 Northern Hemisphere season. And you can see that for both the Americas and Europe, it's pretty much mirroring a 2019 or a pre-pandemic season. However, just pointing out in the Americas, they are seeing quite a bit more bee activity. I'm moving on to 2024, what's happening so far this year. So this graph is national data, and it shows our weeks and then our number of notifications, and we've got our WA notifications in red. And what we can see is that while New South Wales started off from quite a high level, it did dip and now it's starting to peak, go up again, and Queensland's also trending upwards. Interestingly, for Victoria, they started off at quite a high level and it's petered off a bit before now starting to increase again. And the other jurisdictions have fairly low levels of activity so far. These next three slides have excerpts from our Virus Watch publication, which is a weekly document that we put out online. If you're not already subscribed to that, I would encourage you to subscribe to Virus Watch because it does give a weekly update of the situation. So this is our influenza notifications by week and by year, mirroring some of the data that David's presented. So what we have here is our 5-year historical cases, and then we've got our current 2024 notifications in black. Our dotted line is our seasonal threshold that we've established here. Couple of things I'll just point out. So 2023, this green line here, interesting, had a little blip here later in what we traditionally associate with the season, which mirrors what I showed you on those flu net graphs in a couple of slides ago. And that also indicated an increase in bee activity in this little blip here. The 2022 season, as David pointed out, that's when we reopened our borders, so we would have had an increase in travel. But what we saw was a bit of a delay, a shift in the start of the season. What we've had, so this is data through to the 14th of March that I exported this. So we've had around 1,300 cases of influenza notified so far, which does remain below our seasonal threshold. The proportion of PCR positive samples that we've had so far remains below 5%, and we're seeing approximately an 85 to 15% split between type A and type B. One of the things that we have in VirusWatch is a number of measures to look at potential severity of season. And one of the things included in there is presentations to Sentinel GP practices, which is the Australian Sentinel Practices Research Network, or ASPRN. And again, we've got our years of influenza presentations, last 5 years, compared to the black line, which is 2024. And what we've seen so far is that the rate of presentations for influenza-like illness to Sentinel GPs is in the mid to high range of what we'd normally expect at this time of year. These two graphs here are a little bit different. This one on the left here is respiratory illness presentations to emergency departments, whereas the right-hand side graph is influenza-like illness presentations and admissions to hospital. And what we've seen is that so far in 2024, it's within the realms of what we'd expect, but it's getting towards the upper range of what we'd expect in this time of year. And the admissions and presentations have been increasing for influenza-like illnesses. So far, we have had 233 hospitalisations, around 17% of our cases that have been hospitalised, but we've had no reported deaths so far this year. When we look at the age groups that we've had with our cases so far this year compared to January to March last year, it's quite interesting in that we can see that this year we've had either a similar or a lower distribution across all age groups, with the exception of these older people, where we've got a higher rate in 2024 compared to 2023. And looking at the distribution of our cases so far this year, the majority of cases, so notification numbers, have been in the metropolitan area. But then when we look at the rate, which takes into account the population, we can see that the highest rate's actually in the Kimberley, followed by the Great Southern. So just to summarise, in 2023 in Western Australia, it was the second highest number of notifications that we've had on record. It was moderate severity with about 19% of our cases hospitalised, and it was mainly children under 10 years of age that were affected, and the season was dominated by type A as expected. So far this year, we've had about 1,300 cases. It is below the current seasonal threshold. Our GP presentations are within the expected range, but our ED presentations are starting to increase. The highest rates that we're seeing at the moment are in our greater than 70 years of age. And again, we've predominantly got type A circulating. At this point, we don't have any early signals of an early season, but this is a bit earlier this year than we would have done this presentation last year. So we're just at this point waiting and saying, thank you.
Are there any questions in the room? Okay, great. Thank you, Nevada.
Thank you.
All right, so our next presenters are Dr. Chris Blythe, who's a Professor of Infectious Disease at Perth Children's Hospital, or PCH, and Telethon Kids Institute, or TKI, Dr. Samantha Carlson, Senior Research Officer at TKI, and Miss Anne Bourke, Immunisation Clinical Nurse Specialist at PCH. They will be presenting on the flu vaccine update among children and pregnant women. Let's get your slide.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it'll only be Sammy and I presenting today because Anne is got an influenza-like illness, so can't be with us today. But importantly, I wanted to, I suppose, highlight some of the work that we're doing to try and improve uptake. And there's lots of people involved with that. So instead of you listening to me again, I thought I'd try and share the love. We're going to focus on children and women, really focusing on influenza vaccine uptake, the why, and what we're trying to do to try and improve uptake, and really trying to shout out to all of you to help us do that. But before they do that, I'd like to acknowledge that we're on Noongar Whadjuk, pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and continue to highlight that influenza is one of those diseases that we see more frequently in Aboriginal families. So we need to have every effort to try and improve influenza vaccine uptake in Aboriginal families. So let's get back to who we're recommending influenza vaccine in. We're recommending it for everyone over the age of 6 months to prevent influenza, but clearly there are some funded and some non-funded populations, and I'll touch on that. It can be delivered with any other vaccine, and importantly for young families this year, with the RSV monoclonal program being rolled out in the next month, it can be delivered with a monoclonal product. So there will be children who are eligible for nirsevimab who will be presenting in that May period of time where they can receive both, and I'd encourage them to receive both. And just a quick reminder, first time you are influenza vaccinated, if you're under the age of 10, it's 2 doses. Okay, this is who it's NIP funded for. So young children, NIP funded from 2020 onwards. We've had a program in WA since 2008, a decade ahead of the rest of the states, and it basically through the data that we collected through that program, we managed to get it on the NIP in 2020. It's funded for all adults over the age of 65, and a shout out to remember that there is a different vaccine for that age group. So flu AD is on the NIP, the adjuvanted CSL vaccine, but also on the private market is the high dose vaccine as well. All Aboriginal people from 6 months. So if you've got an Aboriginal family presenting, everyone can get a vaccine at this stage. All pregnant women and those with specific medical conditions. And just a reminder about the state funding, primary school age children are state funded, and I'll present some data on that. And don't forget the healthcare workers, both in the private and the public, but from WA Health perspective, healthcare workers can access an influenza vaccine. Now, this is an old slide. This is a 2008 slide, and also shows how much things have changed over the last little while. I put this slide to highlight that preschool children are the ones at greatest risk of flu. But actually, this is data based on hospitalisations and testing, and things have changed over the last 15 years. We're testing more in the community, and as our previous presenter highlighted, we're actually getting more testing and more disease detection in that primary school age children. But I put this up to highlight, say, preschool kids are the group at greatest risk of flu hospitalisations. And another important slide is that if you look at flu deaths, more than half of flu deaths occur in well children. So if we're going to try and prevent severe influenza, just focusing on those with comorbidities is not going to work. We're going to need to target those who are healthy children as well. So it's really something that we're important at a community level. And it also shows that actually comorbidities really drive some of the mortality associated with adult influenza. And just to hit that point home, As far as flu deaths, influenza is the most common vaccine-preventable cause of death, more common than meningococcal disease, pertussis disease, and pneumococcal disease. These are data pulled out by the New South Wales Ombudsman over the 2005 to 2016 period, and it really highlights that although we largely think of flu as relatively mild, it does cause severe disease and causes more deaths than other vaccine-preventable diseases. And that's the start of our program in 2008. So this was 2017. And I highlight that each year we get flu deaths in paediatric patients. The last big year we had was 2019, and we had 5 paediatric deaths that year. So this is something that we are trying to highlight. Flu vaccine is a way to try and prevent severe disease. And it was on the back of a really bumper year in 2017 that all other states came on board. And so these are some of the programs that were launched at the end of 2017. 2018, all states funded preschool influenza vaccination, and it was funded for all Aboriginal families from 2019 and on the NIP for all young children from 2020. Now, David's nicely pointed out, it's a moderately protective vaccine. And I know that's a hard sell. It would be great to get up here to say we've got a perfect vaccine that covers all influenza. We don't. But a moderately protective vaccine that reduces your chance of being hospitalised at least by half and your chance of severe disease by more than half. And these are data we've looked at in children over a 10-year period on a national data set. And it really highlights the numbers that we're looking at. We're looking at vaccine effectiveness in general between 50 and 60. And yes, it varies by year, it varies by strain, but it is pretty consistent. Importantly, it is protective in the very young and the elderly. It's protective in Aboriginal families, and it's as protective in those with comorbid conditions as it is in healthy kids. So this is something that we should be recommending. So let me jump to primary school children. David nicely highlighted that actually they are the vectors. If we're going to prevent community spread, we need to vaccinate the vectors. And so that's where primary school children fit in. They are the ones who are least likely to be hospitalised, but they're the ones most likely to bring it home to their younger siblings and pass it on to their grandparents. So if we can vaccinate that group, we can prevent community transmission. This is work we've done to try and put some numbers on this. So this is a published model that the UK government has used to model their program. We've applied it to the West Australian population. And really what it does is it tracks flu in the community and allows us to increase or decrease vaccine uptake and effectiveness in specific populations. And so we've divided the West Australian population into different groups, less than 5, primary school, secondary school, young-ish adults, and I've just realised I'm out of the young-ish adult group now, the slightly less youngish adults, I'm going to say, and older Australians. And really it's looking at how you contact each other based on some European data. And so we've applied a number of different scenarios. And the question we're asking this model is, okay, I have a preschool program. Let me add a primary school program. And do I get any extra bang for my buck if I add a secondary school program to that? And we've tried that over a number of different settings. We've got a good vaccine, we've got a really good vaccine, we've got a moderately good vaccine, and looked at different uptake. The take-home message is any efforts that we can do to try and improve vaccine uptake in that primary school population pays off in spades. So if we only had 10% uptake, we would estimate there's about 170,000 flu cases, a lot of them very mild, but in Western Australia each year. But if we can increase that vaccine uptake to 50%, we can drop that to about 70,000 cases. So a dramatic difference. And importantly, drop it in every single age group. Vaccinate the vectors, you protect the grandparents. And if you look at then rolling that program into the secondary school age kids, yes, you get more bang for your buck, but actually not that much more bang for your buck compared to the primary school. So if you had limited resources, primary school is where you'd focus. And let's put some numbers to that. both in cases and costs. So for every 10% increase in uptake in primary school aged children, we have a dramatic reduction in community disease. And if we put dollars on that to the WA health system, even a 10% increase uptake in primary school will save us more than $4 million in hospitalisation costs. If we could get even a 30% increase, we're over $9 million. So it really looks at actually how much does it cost to roll out primary school programs or programs to target primary school age children. Investment in this is likely to save us in dollars and keep populations, particularly elderly populations, out of hospital. And so, vaccinate the vectors. So particularly those who are working in general practice, if you are seeing young children come in for other things, it's worthwhile highlighting to these families that actually not only are they likely to benefit from the influenza vaccine themselves, but grandma's going to benefit too. Okay, let's jump on to pregnancy. David's touched on this, but I'm very keen to highlight the important role of vaccinating pregnant women. And I brought a pregnant woman along there importantly to highlight that point. So these are data from the pandemic. So 1 in 10 people in ICU in the pandemic were pregnant. And it was one of those moments for me that really highlighted, wow, now this is such a risk factor. So walking around intensive care units, and I was doing that at that stage, I was doing a lab job doing ICU rounds, 1 in 10 ICU patients were pregnant. Bizarre compared to what we normally see in ICUs. And it really highlights that pregnancy is a risk factor for itself. If you look at pregnant age-matched women compared to non-pregnant women, your chance of hospitalisation, intensive care admission and death from influenza ranges between about 3 and 6 times more. So this is not all about the baby, it's actually about the woman and the baby. Protecting the woman from flu is beneficial to her and also beneficial to her baby. And these data highlight that to you. So vaccinating pregnant women protects the mum, and this is some South African data looking at vaccine effectiveness in pregnant women. It's about 50%. Now, clearly that's going to vary by season, but I put these data to highlight that actually pregnant women benefit the same as non-pregnant women from a flu vaccine. The reduction in stillbirths, so in other words, the fetus benefits, reduction in stillbirths is about 50% as well, and importantly, their infants benefit as well. Antibody from mum flows across the placenta and provides protection for the first 6 months for that baby to the tune of about 50%. Importantly, that does wane. So those children 3 to 6 months are at greater risk of severe flu compared to those very early on, but it's the best we can do because we don't have vaccines that are licensed below 6 months of age. So the biggest challenge we've got is getting vaccines into arms. Now, on the right-hand side, we've done very well from a pregnancy perspective, but COVID hasn't been kind to vaccine programs, and we've had a shift in every vaccine program that we've been running, including in our pertussis vaccine uptake and our flu vaccine uptake in pregnant women. So it's really important to remind that group. Unfortunately, we're way behind in the preschool children. We peaked in 2009 at 50%. And adverse events of 2010 plummeted that rate. We peaked in 2019 at 50%, then we had COVID, and then flu vaccine came off the radar of parents and providers. And so we've got a lot of work to do to try and improve our flu vaccine uptake in preschool children. Looking forward to Rachel's presentation to really highlight what we've got to do in this space. We need to get vaccines into arms. And so I'm going to hand across to Sammy, who's going to talk about some of those strategies and hopefully give you some hints about how we can achieve that.
Thank you, Chris, and thank you for inviting me here today, CDCD and everyone, really. So I am Sammy Carlson, a Senior Research Officer and Vaccine Social Scientist at Telethon Kids Institute. And I did a PhD a few years ago on really this topic, improving influenza vaccine uptake, mostly among children, but also pregnant women. So, children, what prevents uptake? This comes from a systematic review I did as part of my PhD, but I've since updated.
So parents may not be aware that their children should be getting vaccinated every year. They might believe it's unnecessary. They might have concerns about side effects. I'm sure a lot of you have heard this as well in your work. Parents may feel that their children already receive too many needles, particularly if it's in that first 18-month period. They feel that others around them also aren't vaccinating, so if they're not seeing it, they're not doing it. They haven't established an annual behaviour of vaccinating themselves or their children. They may not have received a healthcare worker recommendation. They might find it difficult to get an appointment, to get to an appointment, or to remember to make an appointment. Or they might just be really busy. From the healthcare workers' perspective, healthcare workers have competing demands, and so not enough time in that 15-minute time slot to recommend this vaccine amongst everything else. Some literature says healthcare workers may not have the skills or knowledge to communicate effectively about the vaccine to parents. Healthcare workers may believe it's a healthcare worker's responsibility to recommend it, particularly if the child has a comorbidity and has a big care team, I suppose. They may just forget to recommend. They may be concerned about upsetting children because they're already giving other injections on that day, and they may not be sending reminders to parents. So what facilitates uptake? Parents may trust that the vaccine is safe and effective. They know how serious influenza can be for children. They know that the vaccine is free for their children. They have a trusted and friendly healthcare worker that they can talk to about their concerns. They've received a recommendation from their healthcare worker, and they have that established behaviour already. From the healthcare worker's perspective, they may be recommending. They may be providing a holistic, family-based and opportunistic approach. So they're coming in for something else and they say, hang on a second, I think you're eligible for the flu vaccine this year. And they work in settings where leaders such as the hospital executive endorse vaccination. And so, yeah, there's that top-down leadership and messaging occurring. Pregnant women. This here comes from a systematic review, and I will try and walk through this plot with you, and I'm sure the EPIs in the room might be able to do a better job than me. But I've tried to highlight green means what increases the odds of being vaccinated, and if they're over that dotted line going downwards, it means it's got lots of evidence around it. So, pregnant women have more odds of being vaccinated if they have general awareness and information about the flu vaccine, and so the odds there is about 5.6, so they're 5.68 times, well, have the odds of being vaccinated. They're aware of policies that are there to make the vaccine free for them. They are aware that the disease is harmful during pregnancy. They feel susceptible whilst pregnant to influenza. They believe there is a benefit to the baby in general and to themselves if they're vaccinated in pregnancy. They've received a healthcare provider recommendation, and so that increases their odds of vaccination by 12 compared to not receiving a recommendation. And like I've spoken about for children, they've got that established annual behaviour already of getting that vaccine every year. The thing that's stopping them from getting vaccinated is the concern about general harm of the vaccine during if they receive it in pregnancy and what that might do to themselves or their baby. And then this here comes from a landscape review done by Annette Regan, who used to be here in WA, on strategies to promote influenza vaccine uptake in pregnancy. And so the things that are working are what I've highlighted here in green. So peer support interventions, such as group prenatal care, where they talk about influenza amongst the group, provider education, provider alerts to discuss vaccination with their patients, standing orders or midwifery-led vaccination programs, interventions to increase access to vaccines, making vaccines free, basically, and policies encouraging vaccination during pregnancy. So what can you do? You can recommend vaccination to your patients. You can consider implementing reminder systems. You can access evidence-based resources that equip you for conversations with patients. And so I've included some links there One is to the influenza immunisation program that WA Health has just released. And another link there is to the SKY resources for healthcare professionals. SKY stands for Sharing Knowledge About Immunisation, and I'm a little bit biased because I helped develop the influenza resources, so I think they're great. You can also share evidence-based resources with your patients, and so there's more SKY resources specifically for patients rather than the provider, and they're on pregnancy and childhood vaccination. Thank you.
Thank you, Sammy, and some really useful hints and resources there. I'm going to present Anne's slides, and what we were going to do is highlight what we're trying to do at PCH to improve uptake in some of our highest risk children. The reason to present this, I think there's many things that we're doing that are transferable to any other setting, whether that be hospital setting or community setting. So we run a targeted flu program for our children between May, usually for 14 weeks. We usually do it a week after the launch of the program from the state perspective, so everyone is aware of that. And really, we do a lot of education with our heads of department and on our banners and our screens, so people are aware of we're having our flu program. We specifically target our inpatients, so really trying to identify those who are at highest risk and really shoulder tap many of our medical teams about the importance of an influenza vaccine, make sure it gets charted prior to discharge, and really highlight that they can have an influenza vaccine at any time during their hospital admission, particularly those who are having longer admissions. In our outpatient department, and remember we're seeing between 500 and 1,000 children every day in our outpatient clinics, we have targeted programs focusing on those clinics where children are likely to come to where they're high risk. And I've put some examples here: Asplenia, our ENT clinics where our children with cochlear implants come, clearly our cystic fibrosis clinic, but also those with bronchiectasis. Our renal disease includes many children with transplants. We have a trisomy 21 clinic, as well as our congenital heart disease service. And so we reach out to those programs, take our trolley and our nurses to those programs and try and vaccinate as many, but also accept walk-ins at our Stand Parent Immunisation Centre, which is open basically business hours, Monday to Friday. Anyone can come in. You don't need to be a hospital patient. So if they bring siblings in, we usually give them, and don't tell anyone, but if their parents come, we usually give them one too. And we try to offer a needle anxiety pathway. Needle anxiety is clearly a big issue and an increasing issue. And so we don't have a huge amount of slots in that pathway, but particularly for some of our highest risk children and particularly some of our neurodiverse children, we offer a needle anxiety pathway for them. We have recently, with WA Health support, brought on an RN for Aboriginal immunisations to really target this group. So she reviews all Aboriginal children attending PCH outpatients, goes individually to these families to highlight the benefits of vaccination, identifies if they're overdue for not only their NIP vaccines, but also flu. Really has a yarn with these families and tries to offer support and education about the benefits of immunisation. And with that, since starting in 2023, we have almost quadrupled our immunisation uptake in our Aboriginal children. And if anyone wants any further information, the services we're offering, that's Judy, who's our nurse manager of the immunisation program. You can look up on health email, or there's a number there. We're very happy to help any service who are trying to focus on high risk and, in general, children. So back to me now from Anne. It's clear vaccines don't work if they stay in the fridge. And so we need to do anything we can do to try and make sure they get out of the fridge and into where they are likely to work. Now, Sammy has highlighted the most consistent factor associated with vaccine uptake is a recommendation from a trusted healthcare worker, and that is both nursing and medical and Aboriginal health worker. Anyone in a trusted position, a recommendation from them is more likely to improve uptake, and this is work we've done in the flu space. We have been exploring the benefit of nudges. So this is a randomised controlled trial. It's a pilot that we ran out of South Australia over the last couple of years, looking at SMS reminders to high-risk children. And in brief, we randomised a number of children with high-risk conditions to standard of care. In other words, you just went through the pathways you normally did, or an SMS nudge. And we're really excited to demonstrate a nearly 20% uplift in vaccine uptake in this high-risk children. We were onto something here. It looked really impressive, and this was done in a single centre over a single year. So we took that to the NHMRC with a partnership grant to do a fantastic multi-centred RCT based on nudge theory. And so nudge theory is what's happening all the time to help you pay your taxes or to slow down at traffic lights and all those sort of things. It's those small behavioural interventions that we're using all the time to try and change behaviour. And so we had a nudge-a-thon. There is a thing such as a nudge-a-thon, helped by a nudge expert to design interventions, and really landed on 3 series of videos, one by a provider, one by a parent, and one by a loved one, encouraging vaccine uptake, and ran that in flu and COVID in pregnant women and high-risk children at 3 centres over 1 year. And it made not a scrap difference. So unfortunately, it's back to the drawing board. It is a complex environment we live in at the moment. Most people didn't want to receive a text from us. Most didn't want to open the video, and most ignored us. So I suppose we highlight that actually we need to continue to do work in this space to work out how best we can encourage some of our community, our high-risk patients, to try and get vaccine uptake. But it comes back to us. Importantly, if we're recommending it and talking about it in now every conversation, I'm sure that is going to make a difference, even if a random text message from a clinical trial doesn't. And so things don't work in the fridge. Please give that recommendation, and we need more research in this space. And I'll close and happy to answer questions. I think Sammy on her slide has got a number of her references there. Rachel.
This is a question for either you or Samantha. I just wonder if you looked into caregivers' behaviours around co-administration of NIP vaccines and flu, and when they go to a visit. I know we're trying to encourage opportunistic vaccines, but do they feel it's too much at one time and don't want to receive all the vaccines at once, or try and schedule another visit? Do you look into some of that information?
Particularly when I'm in clinic and I see a lot of vaccine hesitance in family, I will take any option. What are you looking for at this stage? Are you looking to get your child up to date? Well, I can do it here, but they might be overdue 5 things. What is important to you? Is it the number of visits? Is it spacing it out? I'll target things to the patient that's in front of me. And to be truthful, for some of my very vaccine hesitant families, if I can get 1 vaccine into their arm, that's a great thing. So I'll often focus on what's most important to you, what do I perceive to be most important, and to be truthful, if I can get a pertussis vaccine into a young child, or I can get a measles containing vaccine into a toddler, I've usually won at that stage. And then because if they have a positive experience, they're more likely to come back. So I don't think it's about making sure that we do everything. It's about actually having a positive experience and realising the world's not going to fall apart.
Thanks. A question for Sam. With your forest plot of what made pregnant women vaccinate, I was surprised to see that protection of the baby was one of the weakest.
Yeah, I was surprised by that too, to be honest.
In my experience, that's one of the strongest drivers to get pregnant women to accept healthcare.
Yeah.
And protection of the mother was high. I wondered if that general category underneath it was protection of both mother and child.
I'll look into that for you, but when I saw that too, I was quite surprised because, as you say, normally it's the baby over the mum that women are wanting to protect. So I'll get back to you.
Hi, I just wondered with some of the other pertussis cases that have been highlighted with the severity of the illness, whether highlighting some of those case studies for young infants or pregnant women would be increase their uptake, or whether it's seen as more of a scare tactic.
I don't like them, but scare tactics work. If you look at our flu vaccine uptake, it's been in the years where we have had significant amount of flu deaths that have been splashed over the West Australian. So that is a challenge. I do think high-profile cases drive action, and clearly Kath Hughes' work in the pertussis space is clear evidence of that. So yes, I think we need to continue to, unfortunately, highlight the bad cases to, I suppose, encourage people that many of these are avoidable. It's really hard for some of these families. It requires incredible strength, and I've tried a couple of times to have families do this. It's hard to do year on, year out. So we need to support those people.
Just like to expand on that scare tactics may work, but it needs to be coupled with a multi-component intervention. So you might scare them into doing something, but you still need the policy and the free vaccine there for them to actually go to and get. But it also works really for media to jump on board and promote that too.
With the needle anxiety pathway, is it just within Perth Children's Hospital, or GPs can also refer to it? And if yes, how?
So we do accept referrals from outside. So you send through to the Stand Parent Immunisation Centre someone who's needle phobic. Now we focus on the group that is the most challenging to do, and there is a bit of a wait list. I'd love to say that there's lots of slots available. There is a big iceberg of needle phobia out in the community, and we're probably just scraping the top of the surface.
And just to confirm, this year, so 2024, all the primary kids will receive free vaccine.
So Joe, I'm looking to you. I have not seen an announcement from WA Health yet about a funded flu vaccine program for all individuals like last year, but it is for primary school, absolutely. But
yeah, primary school children definitely up to year 6 under the state funded program, but we're making an announcement in my presentation at the end about all the eligible cohorts, and we'll go touch that on then.
Thank you.
Good day. What's that? A lot of some of the stats that's been shown indicate that Aboriginal people in WA per population account for a large number of hospitalisations related to influenza. From this information, what do you recommend for Aboriginal, just for the health services that have patients who are Aboriginal? How could they adapt their service delivery to improve and just to cut down the rates of hospitalisation for Aboriginal people?
So I suppose it depends on your service. If I was in an AMS environment, I'd be offering the influenza vaccine to everyone who walks through the door, because they're a funded population, it's NRP funded. The more we can get it open and discussed, the more families are engaged with that. For those who are having Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal clients through their service, I would be asking the question up front. Do you identify as being Aboriginal? If you do you know that you're able to access an influenza vaccine? That's what I'd be doing. Importantly, we do need to make sure we've got adequate resources, particularly that are attractive to Aboriginal families and understandable, to really make sure that information is available. But also, I'd love any hints about how we can encourage Aboriginal families to have an influenza vaccine, because uptake we need to improve.
Hi, thanks, Chris. Yeah, I don't think it's a wasted effort to learn about the nudge theory and whether it worked or not. So that was worthwhile doing. But I want to also say that it's about scaffolding. And I think, you talked a lot about the power of the healthcare worker voice, the trust, the relationship. So it's something that you'd kind of speak to parents about, and then you get that text from that general practice, and it's that building of that in the busy lives. So I wouldn't completely dispute that. That's all I wanted to say. Thanks.
Yeah, we were surprised about that. Not that surprised about the COVID vaccine response. It was relatively late in the COVID era. Most people who were going to get vaccine would have been vaccinated. We were kind of surprised that we didn't have a significant uplift in our influenza vaccine program. I think many had already set their minds, and the ones who we weren't able to nudge those who hadn't. But I agree, actually, the relationship is key as well. And that sort of relationship with your, whether that be your general practitioner or your care provider, makes a big difference, not random people on a text.
Okay. Yes, I work in the Kimberleys. I've been there for about 5 years doing various remote communities. One way you could get that graph, which is horrendously going upwards, this is controversial and I'm not condoning it, but the quickest way you could get an outcome would be to offer payments for every needle going into every arm, both child and adult. And that would get your graph coming downwards fairly quickly. As I say, it's controversial and it's probably not to be condoned, but that would be one way you could do it pretty rapidly.
And just to clarify your comment, is that a payment to the recipient or to the healthcare worker to deliver?
No, I'll be honest about that. No, I'll be very moral and say that we would go probably to the parent or to the provider, the carer. Yeah, that I think would probably help a lot. Yeah.
Which we saw work in some populations during COVID with the COVID vaccine. So
yes,
yeah.
I'll just add to that. So what's that? The incentives for promoting uptakes is valuable in some communities. If you could show that Aboriginal people account for hospitalisation, what's that? If an incentive is one way to bring them in, increase uptake, that's a positive step. What we don't see is maybe they're affected by other social issues as well. Poverty is one of them. So poverty and how it affects people, does that affect their uptake or their positive experience about coming to a health service, uptaking the information delivered by the health professional. So Maslow's hierarchy of needs, what comes first? They have to have that safety security before they can absorb that more information and have they need to have that self-determination. So we have to give it to them.
Thanks for those comments. Thank you.
That's all.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Chris, and thank you, Sammy, and thank you to Anne as well. Okay, so our next presentation is by Dr. Rachel Foong. She's an epidemiologist in the immunisation program at CDCD. Rachel will present on the influenza vaccine coverage in 2023.
Just kidding. Thanks, everyone. Hopefully you can hear me online. So here at the immunization program, we do report on vaccination coverage and uptake. In the past year, we were doing it weekly for different regions and age cohorts. And this is mainly to also inform the program and help us drive activity throughout the year. Oops. So this is the first of many figures that I'll be showing in my presentation. So we report coverage from epidemiological week 10 onwards. So this corresponds to about March to week 40, which is the end of October, corresponding with the influenza, the peak influenza season for all ages 6 months and over, which is the cohorts that are eligible for influenza vaccines in WA. So showing
coverage also for the past few years. So just can compare how the trends have changed over time. And what you can see for these graphs, and I'll talk about it later, is we've also highlighted May, June, July, because as you might have known, in the past last year and the year before, we ran a free flu program over these few months. So in 2023, it's not working. We achieved overall coverage of about close to 32%, which was a bit lower than what we achieved in 2022, which was higher, and also 2020, which has been our highest to date. So this is what that overall graph broken down by age cohorts. So we have the 6 months to under 5s on the top left and the over 65. So these are the cohorts covered under the National Immunization Program to receive free flu vaccines. Also the 5 to under 12 years, which is the school age cohort covered by the state program, and the 12 to under 65 years, which were the cohorts that were eligible for a free flu program last year and the year before. So essentially in the last few years, all of the WA population were eligible to receive a free flu vaccine. So what you can see for all age cohorts in 2020, there was high coverage. I guess I think we know why that was the case. I think COVID was getting announced and there was no vaccine at the time. I think in 2019, you can see the highest coverage achieved for under 5-year-olds in the yellow. And I think that was in response to also the high number of pediatric cases in that year, as was spoken about before. So as a whole, I think if you look at the 12 to under 65 years, we can also see the impact of the free flu program in 2022, because that program was announced in June, and that sort of increased in that month for the age group. So that in that age cohort, that was the second highest to date achieved so far. But as a whole, you can see that the highest age group that is the over 65-year-olds with over 63% coverage. And unfortunately, the cohorts with the lowest coverage is the school age cohort, which I guess we spoken before is the group that is the most likely to transmit influenza. So this just shows the same information in a different format. So I guess this shows activity, the immediate activity in response to some actions that we did throughout the year. So again, we can see in 2020, there was the high peak, which occurred very early on. So in most cases, uptake happens just before May. You can see this happening in the over 12-year-olds to under 65-year-olds, and again in the over 65-year-olds, whereas in the younger cohorts, uptake is a bit slower and maybe occurs slowly throughout May to peak around June. In the younger ages, again, you can see the impact of the 2019, where that happened in June, and therefore uptake immediately went up in children. You can see the impact of the free flu program in the 12 to 65-year-olds, where when that program was announced in June, there was a quick spike, and then when extended in July, there was a little spike as well. But in May, again, I think last year's program started in May, and that's when the highest uptake occurred. So what we've also have here is, I think, some of the nudges that we did. So I think in 2022, it wasn't an SMS, but we did send out reminder letters to parents of under 5-year-olds who had not received a vaccine, and this did result in a quick little uptake. We did it again in 2023, but this was SMSs, which didn't really seem to have as much an impact as letters. And as a whole, I think in 2020 last year, there was a lot of media in June as well, following some increased cases, and that did have an impact in all the age groups. And you can see the little spikes in some of these. So this just shows coverage by Aboriginal status in the different age cohorts that we measure, and unfortunately it is a bit lower compared to non-Aboriginal people, which is not ideal given the higher number of cases. And at a whole level, I think it's about 10% lower in Aboriginal people compared to non-Aboriginal people. Similar information, again, just broken down by different regions and Aboriginal status. And again, in all areas, I think coverage is a bit lower in Aboriginal people, except for in the Kimberley and the Pilbara. So moving on, so all the data I've shown so far is from the Australian Immunisation Register, which unfortunately up until now hasn't been very good at capturing antenatal immunizations. However, we're hoping this will improve because you might have seen there was a new field added to when you administer a vaccine where you can choose if it's an NIP or a state program or also an antenatal vaccine. So assuming the data is recorded correctly, we can have a better monitoring of this program. But today, what we have used, and you might have seen Chris show this slide as well, is the data that's in the midwives notification system. So this is just ask the question of whether a pregnant woman has received an influenza vaccine and if they knew what trimester it was in. So you can see a lot of nones and also unknowns. So I guess the most reliable information is the lower 4 bands, which which confirms what trimester or if they didn't know. So if you look at the gold, the yellow, orange band, you can see that it sort of going up from 2017 up to 2020, but after 2020, it's been progressively going down. And it's, I think, as of last year, was sitting at about 45%. So what we also do when we report our coverage is we also look at where people are accessing their influenza vaccines. And I guess since pharmacies have come on board in the last few years, I think there was a trial from 2018 to administer NIP vaccines to over 65-year-olds. And with them participating in the free flu program over the past few years, there's been a shift where, and I'm showing the data for all age groups, and this is except for the under 5-year-olds where the GPs are still their main source of vaccinations. There's been a shift where I think pharmacies are now providing a lot more vaccines compared to other groups. So just to show how we are performing compared to the rest of the country, so national data is available and published online from NCS, the National Centre for Immunisation Research and Surveillance. So it's a bit different to how we report it in terms of the age cohorts, and also I think they finished their reporting in the first week of September. But as a whole, I think WA isn't performing too badly. I mean, we're performing quite well and in line with the national average. So the data, but for all people above and by Aboriginal status down below. And again, we're doing quite well comparable to the rest of the country in the younger age groups. However, I think maybe another area of concern is in the older Aboriginal population. So again, in 2024, we will be, we've already started reporting coverage as of last week, and we will continue to do so throughout the season. So if you work in WA Health and you are working in the influenza immunization space, like you can access this dashboard, just send us, contact our team, and we can give you access to this Power BI. And I think hopefully with the data source that we have, it will be updated more frequently than weekly. So just to sum up what I've spoken about in the past few slides, so coverage this year has been a bit lower compared to last year, and this was across the board for all age groups. I think there has been a shift where the community is accessing their vaccines as well, with a higher increase in the proportion of influenza vaccines administered by pharmacists. And of course, there are areas where coverage is a bit lower, so where possible, I think considering opportunities to promote vaccination to school-age children, Aboriginal people, and pregnant people would be great for, I think, this year. So thanks very much.
Questions for Rachel?
Just a query over the trimester of which getting vaccinated in. Surely that actually makes a lot less of a difference, because if the vaccine's predominantly uptaken between April to June, that, I mean, it doesn't matter what trimester you're in, you're in that trimester, in that period. Do you know what I mean? So whether or not, if you're in your first trimester, it doesn't mean you have a higher uptake of first trimester vaccination. It means that that woman just happens to be in the first trimester during that vaccination period.
I don't think we're comparing which trimester is better in this instance. I think we're just comparing whether they received the vaccine as a whole. But I think that the data is available. That's why it's presented that way.
Yeah.
But as a whole, I think it was about 45% in 2023, which is lower than
Yeah.
previous.
So just as a whole,
Yeah, yeah.
smaller, but yeah.
Rachel, apologise if you mentioned it while I was out. Do we know the pharmacy program, which vaccines they're delivering as far as to which populations? Are the pharmacists delivering it to some of our highest risk, or is it to some of our lower risk patients? And if so, how do we, I suppose, really activate them? Because they're clearly a fantastic group that are delivering vaccines to really seek out some of our highest risk patients to make sure that they're vaccinated.
So they are delivering so I think there's 12 to 65, that's the predominant group, but it's also affecting all cohorts, so over 12s as well and over 65s. Just not the under 5s because they're not able to do that at this stage. So I think we have the data on different cohorts as well. Just trying to remember off the top of my head where. But I mean, we can look into more detail if you want, but it is mostly the 12 to 65s and over who are getting there.
That's very good. Hey, thank you, Rachel. Next up is Darren Westphal. He's a Senior Program Officer of the Immunisation Program at CDCD. Darren will be going through the vaccine brands for 2024, the ordering, the reporting requirements, and cold chain.
Thank you, Shauna, and thank you, everyone. We've had some really good presentations on why we need to be recommending and vaccinating, and I'll now tell you how to get the vaccines that you can use in your programs. So this is just acknowledging the vaccine management team and particularly Sharon, who helped with the slides. First of all, just as a piece of business, please make sure that you don't have any 2023 influenza formulation vaccines in your fridge. Those have all expired and they should be discarded. So before any 2024 vaccines arrive for flu, please make sure that you discard those to avoid any errors. Any wastage can be reported to WA Health through the usual channels. It's really important that your email address that you use when you order vaccines is up to date and correct. And we have sent out some communications about that. But that actually was highlighted when we were sending pre-allocation information to providers, and we got a lot of bounced emails. We expect that the email that you use to order vaccines is current, is up to date, because that's where you get your order confirmations and your dispatch notifications. As much as possible, that should not be a person because people go on leave, they get sick, they get busy, but a shared inbox where multiple people are able to access that information should someone be away. So please make sure that your email address is correct. And I would also say that your delivery address is correct. And by and large, mostly that is the case, but sometimes you might move practice and forget to do that or move site. We've started the pre-allocation for Fluad Quad. That is largely finished. Still trying to get things out this week to all providers. And that's great. We were able to start a bit earlier this year, able to get that kind of initial dosage out. And as David Speers suggested, looking at when flu happens, the timing is great with starting vaccinations in April, in late April. Ordering top-up vaccines for fluad quad and also vaccines for other programs is dependent on us receiving those vaccines, and we haven't gotten all of those in yet. But we expect to get most of them this week, so I'm hoping to be able to open ordering for other vaccines, including for children under 6 months, the primary school program, and so on, next week. So just keep an eye on the ordering system. We'll also send a message out through probably vaccine updates and through the email accounts that we have on file for your ordering. Once supply is in place, we'll be able to accommodate weekly deliveries. So as you know, we deliver fortnightly. You can order twice a month, actually, now, and we'll change that because we know that there's a lot more throughput during the flu season, and your vaccine fridge might not be able to accommodate 2 weeks or 3 weeks worth of vaccines. So we do make that available to all providers for this short period. We understand that the demand is always really high at the start, and also our warehouse is quite full, so we're really happy to get things moving through, but we also need to make sure that we have stuff in the warehouse. And I would also ask that you wait until you've got vaccines in your fridge before you schedule clinics, just to avoid disappointment. We'll have a lot of information on the ordering system. So as you go into order, you find your fluad quad, there'll be some information about program information, such as if we need to limit the amount that you can order and so on. Hopefully we don't have to do that too much this year because we really want to try and get things moving. So this is just a timetable that kind of shows what's happening, what we expect is going to happen. But of course, this is all can change due to, you know, trains not being able to get over from the East Coast with supplies. There may be a slight delay, but really hoping to get all of that fluad quad in your fridges before Easter. But then after Easter, you'll be able to order top ups, or if you weren't a part of the pre-allocation, it's no problem to do that. So I'd maybe just in the room, show of hands, have already received some fluad quad or already received some nirsevimab. Okay, that's great. I expect that there'll be more coming this week. The warehouse have said that they've largely got those packed and are hoping to get that out. One thing to note, we did say please try and refrain from ordering other products during this pre-allocation time. There have been a lot of other products ordered. So if it does trickle over, it may trickle over into next week before all of it is delivered. These are the vaccines that are available this year. So really there's only one change, and that's the cell-based vaccine that David talked about, the Flucelvax Quad. But otherwise, all of the other vaccines are similar. We're using Flu Quadri again for our primary school-aged program, Flu Quadri and Flu Rix Tetra for the healthcare worker program for WA Health staff. So this is the new product here in 2024. It's not new. It's been around in the private market for a few years, but it's on the NIP this year. See, there's a little green kind of plot on there that says for 6 months age and older. It's licensed for that age group, but the NIP is funding it for people who are on that medically at risk, in that medically at risk category. For 5 to 64-year-olds. So it's replacing a Fluria Quad, and a Fluria Quad's no longer available. So just a little bit about, you know, when your vaccine order arrives, you know, excitedly open the box and get your vaccines out. It's really important that you stop that tag alert. You hold and stop the start-stop button for 5 seconds until the stop sign appears. Because that means that tag alert will stop recording. If you set it on the bench, go put the vaccines in the fridge, take a couple calls, then there might be a breach because it's been on the bench for a bit of time. And once you've looked at that, you've got the tick of approval, everything's good, just chuck it out. It's disposable, and we just don't want to have the risk of having it sit on the bench, and the next day somebody comes in and if it hasn't been stopped properly, they get all worried about possibly having had a breach. So cold chain is everybody's business, from the time, from the delivery driver that's bringing it to you, to the, the receptionist or whoever's accepting it at your site, or the pharmacist. And it's so important that if you have a breach, and you should be monitoring your fridges, and you should be checking the temperatures by downloading that data every week. If you're not, please start doing that, because that's part of Strive for 5, and it's really important. We had a couple of instances. We've had very large practices that didn't report breaches. It was found, and a lot of vaccines had actually been administered to people, and it's quite an administrative nightmare to recall patients, explain to them that they need to be revaccinated. So anything above 8 degrees, and of course, there's that exception of really short periods of time, up to 12, for restocking the fridge. But absolutely anything below 2 degrees, you must report that, and cold chain breaches are reported to your public health unit. Just some important reminders to finish off. Make sure your poisons permit or APRA registration is up to date. If you have a microphone on, could you please turn off your microphone? Thank you. Ensure that those are current. If it expires at the end of March, we're not able to deliver to you in April. So you have to make sure that that's up to date. The Medicines and Poisons branch will send out a reminder 3 months before, and it's your responsibility to make sure that that is up to date. We do have some. They used to expire at the end of June, and now they expire 12 months from when you make that payment and get that done. APRA registrations for sole providers. Again, check your account email. Can't stress that enough. We can't get important, timely information to you if we don't have the right channel to do that. Weekly deliveries will be available after Easter and for the initial weeks of the influenza season. I'd like to say 6 weeks, but if demand is really high and we're really sending things through, we're not gonna switch it to fortnightly if you're still vaccinating and ordering, and that's still required. So we're going to do that as long as needed. Anything that I cut something off there. Anything that is any new information we'll put on the ordering page, so that when you go into order, we'll update things there. Look for the. Oh. Thank you, and I really do mean thank you. It's a really, really busy time for us, but that also means it's a really busy time for you. So thanks for your support of vaccination and vaccinating during this time for this important illness. And if you're involved in the Civimab program, thank you, and hopefully we can breathe a sigh of relief in a few months' time, and just look back on a successful year. So thanks again.
Questions for Darren?
Just wanted to double check. So from the vaccines for the flu, the only one that it's cellular is Flucelvax. All the rest is egg-based.
Yep.
Okay.
That's right.
And then other question is there a plan for free for all vaccine? Like there is no category. There's no category. Everybody's gonna get free flu vaccine like it was years before.
Well,
okay.
It's all right.
Oh, Sorry. As we each health service and provider rolls out some training for their staff, you've got valuable resources. Are we able to use that and adapt it for our purposes so we can get our staff ready for the rollout, both for the influenza and for the RSV? Because yeah, that's valuable information that you presented.
So yes, there are resources available, and we hope to have those. Not sure when.
That's coming in the next presentation
Yeah. So,
too.
yep. Great question, and just hold on to that. Any other questions or anything online?
Sorry, just one from Diane. When are the vaccines available in pharmacies?
For what? Oh, so all of our flu vaccines will be available at the same time for everyone. So whether you're a community pharmacy, whether you're a hospital or a GP, you'll be able to get those at the same time, and it's ordering through the same way that you order other vaccines. Also, the frequency with which you can order is the same for community pharmacies and for GPs and for everyone else. Community pharmacies will have also received their pre-allocation for Fluad Quad, and so a lot of community pharmacies will have that in their fridge right now as well. And as always, vaccine orders at health.wa.gov.au if there's anything that you're concerned about, but we want to be able to support you. But we can't promise everything either. Thanks.
I promise last one. So the other question I have, so the best to start actually vaccinating is end of April, beginning of May.
So the best time it's really a clinical decision. When you have the person in front of you, the best time to vaccinate someone is when they're in front of you and they want to get vaccinated. But clinically and looking at available data, kind of that late April kind of time period, and it really depends on when the flu comes. But in the end, it is a clinical decision that you will make as a provider when you have a patient in front of you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Darren. Okay, up next is Ms. Joanne Morgan, the manager of the immunisation program at CDCG. Joanne will be presenting the influenza program overview for 2024. Thanks.
Thank you, Shauna. So thank you everyone for coming today to listen to our influenza update for the year. I know this is a really busy time, as Darren's pointed out, with our previous update on the RSV, and we've also got a healthcare worker influenza update coming soon. So we appreciate the time and effort that you've put in to come today. So I'm going to go through a few things today. Some of my slides have already been covered, so I'll just jump over those and allow time for questions at the end. But we'll go through, just briefly mention the ATAGI statement. Why do we have a program? I think we've probably already worked that out. Our role as health professionals, some news to share, which is the embargoed information, hence the stop, some eligibility, which we've already covered, our authority to immunise, some education requirements, our dashboards and resources, which have been mentioned as well. So as you may realise, in February, the ATAGI statement was released for vaccines in 2024 for influenza. I'm not going to go through the whole statement. I think it's 5 pages long, maybe 6. There is a link in the presentation that will come around, but ATAGI will guide us with which influenza vaccines we use in Australia, what virus strains are in those vaccines, the timing, and also who we vaccinate. So I really encourage everyone to read this document. So why do we have a program? As Chris and a few other people have mentioned, one of the most common vaccine preventable diseases in Australia, and it's also one of the common causes of hospitalisation. So in 2023, we had 21,000 influenza cases notified, and this is similar to pre-COVID figures. which in 2019 was around 23,000. So that's taken from our notifiable disease database. The preceding years were much lower. We had border closures, we had COVID, and we had a lot of public health measures in place. So while influenza affects people of all ages, notification rates are highest in children around less than 10 years of age, and the annual influenza vaccination is recommended for everyone aged over 6 months. You've already seen this slide. WA, compared to the rest of the country, we are doing well, but we can improve. So if you look at the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander data, I think if you look around the 5 to 15-year age group, we are actually doing better than Australia in that cohort, and that's one of the cohorts we do want to increase in. But then when you look overall in the 5 to 15-year age group, including Aboriginal children, it's around 18.6%, but I think we also need to increase that by around the 10%, I think, Chris, you were saying, and we would save around $4 million in healthcare costs. We would prevent children from getting sick, we will prevent deaths, but for us as healthcare professionals, we prevent ramping, bed closures, or blocked up beds, more parents being in hospitals. It decreases our workload within the healthcare system. So that's something to think about when you're looking at promoting the vaccine. So this has been talked about briefly, I think, in nearly everyone's talk. This is not an endless list of what our role is. So my background is nursing. I was or am an immunisation nurse. I have a strong belief that we can do all the health promotion we need, but if we do not trust our healthcare provider, we're not going to actually increase our rates. So I'm asking everyone here, everyone online, to really think this through when you see your patients. So one, we need to educate and train ourselves. We need to encourage that as leaders and managers. We need to have a workforce that we engage with. We need to give time to our staff to do the education and training and to become experts in the field. We need a timely vaccine order, which Darren has just touched on, but we also need to administer those vaccines at a timeliness that's right. So your question around when to do it, end of April, start of May, that sometimes does change depending on the year. But if your vaccines arrive in your fridge on the 20th of April, go for it. Let's start the program. We've got a shortage of healthcare workers across the state. We need to be able to have enough vaccine clinics to enable vaccines to get into arms. We need to promote accurate information. If you hear incorrect information, don't engage in that conversation, don't encourage it, give them the right information. Don't go down the rabbit warren of social media and start sharing something that you think may be right. Educate yourself and make sure you are correct, because that falls into the category of misinformation, and we don't want that. We need to promote what's right. Collaborate with your other service providers, network, talk to community organisations if there's small mothers groups that you're familiar with, clinics within your health service provider that's doing outreach clinics, try and encourage them to take on this influenza program as well. No one should come through a clinic without having an opportunistic vaccination offered to them. Not everyone will know about it, not everyone will seek it. So offer it to everyone that comes in. Help assess priority groups. Ask someone, are you Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander? Do you have a medical condition? Ask them. You're not meant to know everything about everyone. The monitoring and reporting is really important. One, for the air, we need to know that. Vaccine safety and surveillance for WABs. But by entering into the air, you give that person a complete medical record. So when they go to their next provider, it's up to date. If you don't put it into the air, that person does not have a complete medical record. There's a lot of other things we can do for health professionals, but we are key in this rollout as well. Now, this is the question that everyone's been asking about. So this is embargoed information, which means you cannot take it out of this room, except if it's for planning purposes. The Minister will make this announcement in the coming week. It is slightly delayed. You can't actually take photos of it either. Sorry. It's been slightly delayed, the announcement, because of the RSV announcement. So there's been a prioritisation of what program was announced first and what we needed to roll out. So the free flu vaccine program in WA will occur again in May, June. It will provide state-funded influenza vaccines for people aged 12 to 64 via GPs, AMSs and community pharmacists. But we've also expanded it this year to include nurse practitioner clinics and corporate vaccination clinics because they missed out in previous years. We're not reimbursing GPs or AMSs or community pharmacies for privately purchased vaccines. And the way we've managed that is in November last year, we sent a letter from our program to those three providers, their peak bodies, saying that we wouldn't be doing the reimbursement and that we would purchase all the vaccines here and we will distribute them as part of the government. So that announcement, I think it's Monday or Tuesday next week. Maybe it's Tuesday. I'm not sure of the date. But after that, by all means, you can share, and I would hope that you do. Just to remind you of the schedule, it's purple at the moment. It may be updated soon. It'll be a different colour because I think we changed the colour. So just to point out that the priority groups there, please don't forget the pregnant women. I know there's been a few discussions there. Offer it to everyone that comes in. Ask people if they've got medical risk conditions, ask whether they're Aboriginal or identify as Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander, and also if they're WA health staff, because some of the health staff may not want to get it through the clinics in their services, but they may want to get it through their trusted providers external to us. So please familiarise yourself with the schedule, noting that it will be updated because RSV is going on it, so it will not be purple. And from this schedule alone, you could actually start looking at your software systems and start recalling patients now that would be eligible, sending SMSs and whatever processes you use in your current environment. Darren's already touched on this, so I'm just going to go over that one. Is that okay, Darren? So for under the government organisations, we have the structured administration of supply arrangements that are written here through Pally's team. We have them for RNs, ENs, pharmacists, AHPs and registered midwives to administer the influenza vaccine. And on those SASs, if you're not sure if it actually caters for your organisation, because sometimes it's outside of government organisations, if there's a contract between, say, WA Country Health and some of their other service providers, just have a look. I've put the link for the SASs there, but these are what we used to call the old-fashioned standing orders, if no one has heard the word SASA, although they've been out for a number of years. All of these groups include influenza. The air reporting, please ensure all doses are reported in a timely manner. We don't want them vaccinated today and then in 6 weeks' time and entered. We really need a timely entry into that. So educational requirements is a little bit different for some, and if you're familiar with our pages that our promotions team keep up to date, down here I've put the link, the educational requirements for immunisation providers, and that'll go through the different provider groups and what you need to do. One of the biggest changes that's happened in the last couple of years is that you no longer have to have completed the full immunisation course for some of our groups to enable you to deliver the or administer the immunisation vaccine. So for registered and enrolled nurses and registered midwives, you have to be APRA registered and you have to have done the immunisation update, which is online, and just the influenza model. You don't have to have had the full course. Midwives are the same. Aboriginal health practitioners, they have to have done the WA Health or the AQUA immunisation course, the online immunisation update, as well as the influenza model. And pharmacists have their own course. They still need to be registered with APRA and also have done the online immunisation update and influenza module. Now, you may ask, where is that influenza module? So Shauna has assured me, wherever she's gone, there, it will be up next week, hopefully. So I would say that it will be, but what we're asking you have to register now and you'll gain access to it. So that normally takes anywhere between sort of 2 to 3 days. We're not going to give anyone access moving forward until it's up and live, so that you don't accidentally do the 2023 learning module and think that you've done the right one. So you can start sending them through. I wouldn't do it today, maybe wait till the end of the week, early next week, and then there'll be a team of people approving people's access, and then you'll be able to get on and complete. What I ask leaders and managers in each of the services, ensure that your team have completed these educational requirements. They are not meeting the requirements of the SASA if they have not completed these modules. We have reporting dashboards. Rachel may have touched on some of those. We also use the NCS data that there's a link there to go to it. We also have a notifiable infectious disease dashboard, which you will have heard some data earlier from that, and that's managed by our surveillance and disease control team that Nevada is the epi from. We have Virus Watch that comes out, and we have the influenza immunisation data from the Australian government. So there's lots of different choices if you want to go and have a look. We have an influenza dashboard as well, but I believe that is only for internal use, Rachel, yeah. Vaccine updates is the best place, the best subscription you will ever sign up for, I can assure you this. And it's free, just like our flu vaccines. So Cassie leads this as part of Pally's team. It is where you will get every bit of information you need to run a program, know what's going on. This is it. We also send out through, as Darren alluded to, some of our vaccine management using the email accounts there. But this is people subscribe to this, so you don't have to remember. It'll just appear in your inbox, and it appears in mine regularly. And this is where you'll get your information, and then you can share it with your providers. So what you can do is sign up for your individual email, but if you have generic emails, because you may have annual leave, long service leave, if you're lucky, that means it's still going to the clinic. I understand in pharmacies, GP clinics, and community health clinics, I've worked in one as well, they are extremely busy places. You need to be able to have a process within that service to share information to ensure the nurses, the Aboriginal health practitioners and the doctors are up to date with what's coming out. So free, everyone, that's your job today, make sure you've signed up. Resources were mentioned. So we've got lots of resources coming out. We're planning on doing something a little bit different with flu this year. And then there's another big campaign that's being done by Department of Premier and Cabinet that we're waiting for that to come out. And it's amazing, and a lot of time and effort's gone into that one. So our resources this year, we have kept them to a minimal level because everything we think will be overshadowed by this. It's going to be a really amazing campaign when it does. So there are posters there, there's key messages, but what we normally do, and I wrote some of them down, I just wanted to, because the program changes over time, there'll be different messages at different times. So when we're looking at the social media tiles and posters, the key messages will change. So early in the season, you'll see, get ready for your influenza season, book your immunisation appointment now. As we move through, we might get to the school holidays. Whilst it's holidays, protect your child against influenza before they go back to school. Kids aged 6 months to year 6, that real important cohort that we need to improve on, can get a free vaccine. Protect them from getting sick and spreading it to others. Book your child's immunisation appointment now. Then we'll move to peak season. And these are just samples, there are more. It's time to get immunised for influenza, so it's a bit more direct, like let's get it done. Make sure you and your family are protected and book your appointment now. And these will be overlaid in our social tiles and our posters that will go out. Now, I think Sammy shared some of the Sky resources. There's lots of information out there. Choose what works best for your service. I can't tell you what to put in your service. We can just share everything that's out there. You know your demographic better. You know what they like. You find what works best in yours and then just put it up and then get the staff to start offering it and have the vaccine in the fridge. So normally, I wasn't meant to jump ahead. So normally we just keep it to, this is an influenza update, but we are in the midst of a really important program rollout. I don't want this to overshadow influenza in the sense that it's more important. These are both important programs. But we are, as Darren had also said, with the Nasivabad program for RSV, we're rolling them out at very similar times. And I understand that's going to be really important and a busy time for your staff. So one, look out for your staff, make sure they're okay. They need to understand the two programs. They can be rolled out simultaneously, and the RSV immunisation and the influenza vaccination can be given on the same day, as with other vaccines with RSV immunisation as well. So it's not a reason not to have both programs running at the same time in your clinic. It's actually really important. But what I ask though, if a parent chooses to not have as many needles on the day, book their appointment before they leave. Encourage that to happen. Don't go just book it on your way out or we'll see you in a month. Actually physically book the appointment with them and encourage them and explain how important it is to actually come back. Because some parents will say they don't want their child to have X amount of needles, and that's their right and that's okay. Our job is to tell them that it is safe. We can do it for your child. But if they still choose, we just make that appointment to bring them back. And that's us as trusted healthcare providers. That's what we need to do with our parents coming in. So that was just a little plug for RSV, but not to take away that our influenza program that we roll out annually is a big program, but we're really proud of it. And I know we can get there, and I'm sure we'll see increased rates this year. So any questions?
So just, I know this is about influenza, but the RSV. Thanks for sharing the 4 cohorts, because I've only seen the 1 cohort shared at this time. But yeah, and will some resources be available on QuickMail?
Yes, they will be.
For the RSV.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just also comment for the influenza. So thank you. I know it's a lot of hard work to learn from what we did last year about those funding and trying to get reimbursements. It just didn't work for our organisation. I can only comment, but we are supported by non-health care workers. They share the message, but when it comes to influenza, they want to have the vaccine, but then they're not funded. But it's great that you guys are pushing for a corporate funded model. And so everyone within the whole organisation can be vaccinated. Please let us know how we can register.
Yep. So with the free flu program, it'll just be like the previous years. You just don't have to order, you don't have to purchase the vaccines from the private market and being reimbursed. You'll just get them all from, when I say us, I say it's actually Darren's team. I have nothing to do with it. It's just created a whole heap of work for his team. But we did that, and thank you for raising it. It was actually feedback from the providers that it was hard work for them, and it took people away from actually putting needles in arms. So anyone can now have a free flu vaccine during May, June. So everyone in your organisation, I know you've got a big organisation.
Sorry, I just have a question for Darren. How long do you think it will be before there's adequate supply of the RSV vaccines? Because at the moment we're only getting a very, very small supply.
Do you want me to answer? We've actually...
Thanks. The initial pre-allocation was just to give you some in the fridge to start with, and then you'll be able to order. But we've based our numbers on the cohort and the number of kids. So we expect that there should be enough. We have supply, but as I said in the RSV meeting, it's a very expensive product, and we just want to make sure that it gets out, it gets into arms or thighs, but we don't want to waste any. And so it's just really important for us, but also for all of you to manage that. If you need more, we'll send you more. I'd rather do that than send you too many, and then you're calling up and saying, no, we've got a lot of extras and we need the space. So, and keep in mind also that babies born from the 1st of May will receive it, will be offered it in hospital before they leave, which is fantastic because we're rolling into an RSV season. So they'll be protected before they leave. But there may be some that don't get it then, but then, a week or 2 later, mom comes in and says, I didn't get it at hospital. I'd like to get it. So it's important that you do have some on hand. There isn't a shortage per se, but we did get enough for the cohort, but we haven't gotten more.
I think it's probably timely to remind us that we have, I think Darren was telling me this morning, around 1,400 providers across the state of WA, that we're trying to ensure that everyone receives adequate volumes of vaccines and immunisations to ensure that they can reach their cohort. So when we did look at while we do the pre-allocation for Fluad Quad, just bringing it back to the influenza update, we look at pre-allocation and to ensure that we don't give every provider more than what they need, and that every provider has access to something. And that's exactly what we've also done with the Nirsevimab. We've looked at, with our EPIs, looked at data for birth notifications for the previous year, and looked at then what your Infinrex hexes that you had
administered over 12 months, did some calculations to work out a 5-month cohort, which is the length of the program. And that's how we've gone with the 25% to start with, but you could have requested more in that initial. But we do our best to ensure 1,400 people, if they're involved in that program, have adequate supply. It's a huge job. Any other questions?
With the requirement now that we've got to say whether it's a NIP funded or state funded or private funded vaccine, it would be really helpful if we had some clear charting so that we could find it.
I was just going to show you on the schedule. It does show it on the immunisation schedule.
Okay.
But we will take that away and see if we can review and make it any clearer. But it is on the schedule currently. It's done by a little asterisk if it's NIP funded or state funded, sorry. But we'll, yeah. I can't do the little pointer like Rachel did, but you'll see the WA state programs are the asterisks and the rest are basically the NIP funded programs. We'll look at our schedule and go from there. Any other questions?
So just a couple from online. We had a few different providers requesting confirmation that they are included in the free flu program rollout. So this was from community health services, private hospitals and in aged care as well.
So aged care for their residents? Yeah, so they're already in most of their residents. I'm making a generalisation. I know that everyone over 65 goes into an aged care. They do have younger cohorts, but then they would be medically at risk, so they're already included.
Aged care staff, sorry, just as
aged care staff, or if they go and seek their vaccine between May and June, they're covered.
And just one other question on the RSV module, when it will be available.
The RSV module will be live next week. Possibly next week. It's with the graphic designer, it's come back. We just need to do a bit more work. It's written. We didn't get some advice on high risk or the medically at risk cohort until finalised sort of late last week. So we needed to wait for that information and we wanted to be reviewed again. So yeah, hopefully next week, maybe early the week after.
Sorry, Joanne, you mentioned making appointments at the point of time if parents don't want to receive all the immunisations. Then I was wondering, I may have missed it in the previous update, what the time period between having, say, an influenza and an RSV or vice versa, NIP vaccine, etc. is?
With the RSV immunisation, there's no time frame. You can have the influenza vaccine today and you can come back and have the RSV immunisation tomorrow or this afternoon. There's no time frame. So that's that's a good point actually, Dale. A key message to take away. There's not the 4-week gap that we say with live vaccines. With RSV, you can have it immediately after the next day.
I just have a comment that I forgot to mention. Always give someone an NIP funded vaccine first. The state, for any state program, that's to kind of supplement those who wouldn't already be covered under the NIP. And I say that particularly for the primary school age program. If you have a 6-year-old or 6 or 7-year-old primary school aged child who's medically at risk, they get an NIP vaccine. They're Aboriginal, they get an NIP vaccine, but it's for those that are not already funded on the NIP. And
Is that all the questions? Okay, so this is what I have Shauna to help organise me. So before we move on to this, again, thank you, a really huge thank you to my team here. We at the immunisation program, we love seeing these programs come to fruition. We love engaging with our stakeholders and our providers, and I thank all our external speakers for coming. On behalf of our Senior Medical Advisor, Dr. Paul Effler, he does clinic at the M Clinic every Tuesday morning, so he's there this morning being a clinic doctor. Unfortunately, he couldn't be here, but he would have loved to have been. But I can't thank everyone enough from I think everyone's sort of sitting around this area from the immunisation team, but thanks again to all our other providers. So we can't improve or provide you what you need if you do not give us an evaluation form. So I harp on about this all the time. We have moved with the times. We have a QR code, so please use that. If you would prefer not to use the QR code, and you can get it up on the screen now, there are paper forms. Fill that in, but can you please fill the paper form in before you leave? Because we know if you take that paper form away, it's going to become landfill. And we would really like to hear what you have to say. We read our evaluations and we do aim to improve, change, or provide you with what you need. So it is really important that you do that. And that's all your homework other than vaccine updates for today. Thank you. Just write that down so I don't forget around the schedule. Oh, yeah. So can I take all notes or do you need them?